I personally adore this film. Like you said, it is the use of colour. It's not quite like anything I've seen before.
It's one of those times where it's really frustrating that horror doesn't get the recognition it deserves, because I really think Florence Pugh deserves some kind of awards recognition for this performance, because I just think she played it brilliantly. I particularly love the use of the kind of doing a slow-burning, horrific horror movie in absolute dazzling sunshine, which I don't think is, at least I've not seen anything done in quite the same way before.
I mean, we watch it yearly since it's come out, minimum. So, yeah, it is a 5.
Hello, everyone. Joining Flixwatcher today, we have Ian.
Hey, guys.
Graham.
Hey.
And as always, Kobe.
Hey.
And we're here today to talk about Midsommar.
Thank you, as always, to the mighty people for the mighty, mighty tunes. And thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills.
Please do remember to write a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you can do where you listen to the podcast, because it really does help us.
And you can join in the conversation with us on Twitter
at FlixWatcherPod and on Instagram
at Flixwatcher.
Hello, film fans. Welcome to Flixwatcher podcast. Joining us today, we have Ian and Graham. If you could please say hello to our listeners and tell them a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
I'm Graham. I am one half of the podcast Nobody Asked For. So we're a film podcast. We deal in top threes, usually ridiculous ones, hypotheticals, and basically recording conversations we used to have down the pub, but now people can listen to them.
Isn't that all podcasts?
Yeah.
And then you go into the drunk cast as well. Let's do this drunk. Maybe not. Who are you? Sorry, the other one.
The other one. I'm Ian. I'm the other half of the podcast Nobody Asked For. Yeah.
That's it. You want to get straight cracking to talk about Midsommar, because
never talked about Midsommar before. Ever.
So we're talking about Midsommar, and you guys have spent at least 80 hours talking about it. Is that right? On your show?
We've spent a lot of time talking about Midsommar. So Midsommar is, I think, fair to say, one of Graham and I's favourite films. When we started the podcast, we decided to do, we'd open every episode with a movie recommendation nobody asked for. And the first ever one of those was The Birdcage, the Robin Williams. Is it Nathan Lane? Nathan Lane. Incredibly underrated comedy. But basically, we'd had an episode about our favourite films we would never want to watch again. So it was just us talking about really depressing films. So we thought, we'll recommend a really upbeat, fun one. Mm-hmm. And then we also decided, you know what? We're going to recommend Midsommar as well, because we think everyone should recommend Midsommar, or everyone should watch Midsommar. And since then, we have recommended it every single episode. We've had 2 Midsommar specials that have come out, and one of those we were lucky enough to be joined by Pavel Pokachelsky, who is the director of photography for Midsommar, and a lot of Ari Aster, all of everything Ari Aster has done. So Midsommar's great. I mean, to skip to the end, Midsommar's a good film.
Well, I mean, we've had Birdcage on here, which is a delight and very upbeat and very nice. Who played Lex Luthor in the original?
Gene Hackman.
Yeah, Gene Hackman's in as well, playing in kind of a funny role in that as well.
Yeah, and Hank Azaria as...
Yes.
I can't remember the character's name, but it's an incredible character name. It's like Spartacus or something like that.
Well, I should say we haven't got 4 hours to talk about Midsommar, as you guys normally do. But let's crack along a bit here. So you've told us how much you love it. Let's go straight to the synopsis. I'll get the timer up. And you've got 60 seconds. Tell us about Midsommar, starting now.
Okay. So, after experiencing a horrific tragedy, Dani and her colossal arsehole of a boyfriend, Christian, travel to Sweden with a group of friends to visit one of their rural hometowns and its fabled Midsummer Festival. This Midsummer Festival happens once every 90 years, so it's a massive deal. And a lot of the friends are anthropology students, so they all are trying to find their muse when trying to kind of write that year's paper. What starts as a quaint and quirky visit becomes increasingly violent and surreal as the full horror of the cult is revealed to them, as all of the light festivities and competition starts to take a dark and slightly beary tone. It is 148 minutes of slowly ratcheting tension, and it's an incredible film.
I think you practiced that. 6 seconds left to go there. Let's stop there. Helen, Midsommar, I know you're a fan of this. You like your horror, you like your Ari Aster. We've had Hereditary on here as well previously.
I mean, I love this film. I think it's great. I think it's really, it's everything you said, really. I think it's also, it just looks really, really good. The cast is great. There's just a moment with a bear that is just unexpected, and it's really dark and disturbing, but then there's also some really hilarious moments in it as well, which is kind of his trademark. And there's also a lot of moments where school spaces get smashed in, which is another thing that Ari Aster loves to do. So yeah, I mean, I love it. Thanks for picking it. Yeah.
What we've kind of always said is it's not that it's gorier than other horror films. It's that he doesn't cut away when other horror films would. So, like, I've arguably seen worse in other films, but you immediately cut away from it.
It's just a glimpse, isn't it? And he's like, you must look at this.
We're going to zoom in now. We're going to zoom in and you're going to stare.
In Hereditary, that wasn't lingering, was it?
But it is later on.
Oh, okay. Afterwards. Yeah, I get you. Graham.
Yeah, what can I say that Ian hasn't? It's fantastic. There's a few things that set it apart from other horror movies for me. I particularly love the use of the kind of doing a slow burning horrific horror movie in absolute dazzling sunshine, which I don't think is, at least I've not seen anything done in quite the same way before. So that to me is really interesting. And then the other thing is that, yes, it is a horror movie. Yes, it's a look into kind of subcultures and cults and things. But really, Ari Aster is giving us a kind of essentially a slow burning commentary on grief and what it can do to a person. And, you know, the fact that on the surface horror movie can give you some of the best depictions of grief I've seen in cinema. The Florence Pugh crying is one of the most visceral, like, outbursts of grief I think I've seen. Is something that's quite impressive. So yeah, absolutely love it.
The midsummer theme, being the longest day of the year in the northern, that far high in the northern hemisphere, is freaky. I remember the first time I was in Estonia over the summer, and we went into the nightclub and came out at 2:00 and it was still light, and we're like, I don't know what's happened here. And then I lived in Norway for 3 years, and I loved that time of year because it was never that hot, but because the sun was out just all the time, it just felt like you could just like go on for days. Then obviously the converse is that winter was a shit show, but it's kind of a weird, freaky time of the year. So I can imagine it just being like a discombobulating experience for these guys who come from England, they come from America and just landed there for the first time, and that's part of the experience. Right from the start, they're unsettled.
Yeah, and then do mushrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, representation goes, like, the representation of hallucinogenics is pretty good on the film. They do a pretty good job of it, especially when she's wearing the headdress and one of the flowers is blinking and all the food on the table. So
subtle, isn't it?
It's amazing.
Then when they're carrying her, the trees behind her are her sister.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, it's something that occasionally will, like, there'll be a Reddit post of, hey, have you spotted this? That goes out like every 6 months. But once you've spotted it, you can't not see it when it happens. But it's just a lot of, like you said, all of the trippy stuff is really low key. And it just really adds to the fact that the whole film is just slowly upping the tension, occasionally getting rid of it, like the head smashing stuff, but then just ramping it up again. And it's so well done.
One of the things that made me laugh out loud most about the trips was when they first did it, when Mark, Will Poulter's character, And I did ask in this kind of show in the notes before we came in, which is the biggest arsehole of the guys that came over. But Mark was just like, yeah, but you got to take a trip at the same time or else we'll have a different trip. And when he was on it, he was like, no, lie down with me. And it just felt, it was like really like trying to be an alpha male, but also like not being fully, the team they just thought he was a bit of a dick in that kind of instance. And I thought that was an accurate portrayal of that kind of person. He just wants to go out there to get chicks. And that was his whole kind of raison d'etre of being there.
Well, what I like is like, so with the question, like who's the biggest prick in the film?
Yeah.
There's a lot of answers to it, and not a single one of them is part of the cult.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel I'm kind of interested in Pele and the guy that brought the British people over. So I'll be like
Pele, who was the only one who was nice to Florence Pugh's character.
He draws her a picture for her birthday, like all the other fuckers. See, they forgot. Like he drew her a picture.
Yeah. No, I mean for me that it is
Christian. Oh, it's Christian.
But for cheating from the good place.
Yeah.
His character, Josh, he knew what was going to happen with like the whole...
With the Etterstoop.
Yeah. And he also knew that Dani wasn't in a particularly good place. And he kept it to himself. And that is the massive dick move as well. Because that was like consciously just being a dick.
Yeah.
And Mark's just the fool, isn't he? You know, that's his role.
I mean, he's literally depicted in a jester's hat in the opening. I mean, and that's another crazy thing about this movie. The entirety of the plot is depicted in the first like minute and a half as a tapestry on the opening credit, or just after the opening credits. But yeah, I think he's got the full jester's hat on and everything, hasn't he?
Yeah, I listened to your episode when you're talking about that, and I need to go back and I should go back and watch that first few minutes. But that, I think there's definite. They've got definite strings to their armor to be a dick in that situation. when they said, "Oh, tomorrow's this thing called the Etterstoop," and Josh, aka Cheetah, was just like, "Oh, awesome! Let's just lean back into this fright fest of people jumping off a cliff." And I don't know I'm not sure if it's a real Nordic thing, but there's a TV show called Norseman, which is a comedy on Netflix, where one of the first episodes in the early scene is about this. I'm not sure if it's the same name they use, but it's about like just jumping off a cliff to like seal your fate with the gods. And they're all like, guys, this is the dumbest thing in the world.
It is heavily debated as to whether it is actually a thing or not. But that Norseman sketch is so fucking funny.
Yeah. It's a great show. It's one of my favorite shows that I discovered in lockdown.
It's the same as the Blood Eagle thing, right? It's all kind of shrouded in Norse mythology. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. But yeah, I think it's definitely interesting to see both of them play out.
Yeah, and I mean, and just to kind of talk about kind of the mural as well, that the fact that the whole film was set out from the outset, because it was all because you can't hide anything when nothing, everything takes place during the day, basically. Everything is out on display from the outset. So, like you said, you've got the bear, you've got, like, nothing is hidden. Everything is kind of there.
What's that about the bear? It's a bear.
It's a bear.
It said ignore the bear. You won't need that later.
It'll be fine.
What I was going to talk about, because there's the American guys and the British guys that came over, they thought they're being killed with kindness. And even though they're being picked up one by one, there's no understanding that they were in the kind of mortal danger until it was too late for them at that time. Like Josh being taken down in the hut when he thought Mark was there, and then he got hit by the hammer, even though they'd seen the people jump off the cliff, and they still kind of thought, oh, these people are great. But they always had their cultish personality to say, no, this is a great honor. We want to do this. When we get to 72, we want to jump off, and that kind of reined them back in. But then there's a bear, and then there's like your partner who traveled from England disappears off without telling you, and then the other one disappears off, and Mark disappears off because he's on the pool, and then he never comes back. And you're just like, everyone's still kind of happy that things are okay, and it's like this kind of weird cultish horror. Obviously, The Wicker Man, you see that kind of thing, and just in culture in general, that really scares me. That's long story short. That kind of thing scares me when people are like nice to you because they want something secretly.
I think it's really interesting, the bits where you talk about like the like the acceptance of the culture, because there is an element of this, right, that if you go into a completely different culture, things may seem very different to you, very weird, but out of respect, there's this kind of like, oh, this is how they do things over here. You know, obviously, when you're 72, you lob yourself off a cliff, and who are we to say any different? So it's interesting. A combination of, I think there's a few things. There's the combination of this, like not wanting to step out of and offend the people that are hosting them. There's from like Christian and Josh, there's just this real we want to be in this and immersed in it as much as possible, because this is going to be like the thesis to end all theses. And then, as you mentioned before, kind of Will Poulter's character is there just to get with whoever he's going to be able to get with. So, and then combine that with the fact that these guys are all super nice to you all the time. It's I guess a perfect storm for them kind of being able to carry out what they end up carrying out.
I think the scariest bit for me is with the, like you said, with kind of the culty aspect of it and killing you with kindness. The scariest bit on top of that is that by the end of the film, you kind of get why Dani's now making the decision she's making. So it's a really interesting look at why people join cults like that in the first place. And that for me is always scary, is like, you know, looking it from outside in, it's mental, right? Like all of the same with like the Wicker Man and, you know, any horror around a cult, it's crazy. But in real life, people join things like that. Well, and I think Midsommar shines a very interesting light on what can happen to lead someone to join something like this.
Without getting too political, but like there's things like the QAnon movement in the US, right? There's been some really interesting.
Sorry, without getting too political, go on.
But there's some really interesting insight. Like the New York Times ran a really interesting article on it, and these people are normal people that feel disenfranchised and have found something in a counterculture that, for one reason or another, speaks to them or accepts them, and they kind of go along. Like you say, from the outside, it's madness, but that draws them in, and then it's just kind of this echo chamber and a constant cycle of, I guess, positive feedback, and they've drunk the Kool-Aid.
I think the thing with cults, and I went deep into Nexium during lockdown, and a lot of the stuff that came out was like, most of these people are not stupid people, but something in their lives that led them to there, or just a suggestion, or they just ended up in a church hall or some kind of hall, and people are like, yeah, well, actually that makes sense. I can be part of this. I can join this. And you don't just turn up to Cult 101 on day one and sign up and like start drinking the anthrax. It's a whole systematic pressure that kind of puts you into that people have succumbed to for billions of years, that they've kind of they've got down to a T, essentially.
Yeah, and it's like Graham said with the kind of, I don't want to say the grief scene, but the kind of the very famous Florence Pugh crying and all the other girls in the cult crying with her. It's the first time in the whole film anyone's really shown her empathy for kind of what she's feeling and the things that she's gone through. So you're watching it's like, oh, you do, like you said, you do get it. Yeah. You get why someone would be kind of drawn in by, you know, especially someone who's lost literally everything by that point, suddenly sees all these people who are empathizing with her, and it's a powerful kind of thing.
It's also when she arrives, they say to her, welcome home. You know, from the outset, they're telling her this is the place that she needs to be. This is where she's going to belong, and this is where she's going to heal. It's like a lot of the time people who join cults or kind of get involved in this, they're often quite lonely, or they've experienced something that's either traumatic or there's loss, and they're looking for kind of the answers and the reassurance. And the moment she arrives, you know, you're back, you're here, you're home. Home is safe. Home is where you want to be.
Do you think she's joined the cult now? Is the question I had.
I know there's a couple of different readings of it where either she's joined the cult or they kill the May Queens. I don't know where I sit on it. What do you have an idea, Graham?
I know where I'd like to think, and I think we've spoken about this on an episode that is yet to be fully recorded. But there would be, I think, we'd love to see, or at least I'd love to see a Midsommar in like 30 years' time, where Florence Pugh is leading the cult and bringing the next group of unsuspecting Westerners into it. So I'd like to think that she's kind of found her place and found her people, even as messed up as her place and people might be.
Yeah, I think she's part of the cult. I think she's been drawn
set for
in.
life now.
That's the nicest way her life is going to end, is basically what you're saying. She's either in the cult or she's dead. So there's
These are the two, because they're not exactly just going to go, all right, anyway, your flight's in a day, probably take you a while to get back to Stockholm, so see you next time.
And how do you get all those flowers in your hand luggage as well? I mean, it'd be a nightmare.
This is true.
Lots of flowers, which, pointless trivia, Ariana Grande tried to buy. She is a massive fan of the film, and they auctioned it all off for charity, and she tried to get them to wear to a party. But she got beaten out, I think, by a museum.
Oh, right. Oh, wow. I mean, sure, why not?
Yeah, as you do.
Well, they haven't. The after this obviously came out, the Halloween outfits across the internet were particularly inspired. There
Across
was
the internet.
amazing the interpretations of obviously the May Queen, but also of the bear as well. I mean, if you're a couple and you're into Halloween dressing up, then it's kind of couple goals, isn't it? If someone is going to go with the bear for you.
It's podcast co-host goals, actually. Dibs on the bear, though.
Was there anyone there as the blood angel? Because that would have been it's just my skin. I'm going to put back. We didn't spend much time with Connie and Simon, did we?
I think you possibly... I haven't seen the director's cut. I assume you spend more time with them in the director's cut.
Not huge amounts more that I remember.
Yeah, not a huge... The big kind of thing in the director's cut is there's a whole extra ritual of them...
At a lake.
Yeah, and it looks like they're going to drown a child. And then the whole point is that everybody steps forward and says, drown me instead. And then they don't drown anyone. And it's all a big thing. The director's cut's really interesting. I can see why the cuts were made. Because it is already a very long film. But it's definitely, if you're a fan of it, I would recommend watching it at some point. Just because it adds extra details in which a cinematic release doesn't necessarily need.
Didn't it get released not long after the initial release in the theaters?
I think it came out. I think it coincided maybe with like the DVD coming out or something like that. But yeah, it's well worth watching. But I don't think you get that much extra time. It's just more time with Florence Pugh, who I think is. I mean, I think everyone could agree. I think her and I think Will Poulter now as well. I think they're some of Britain's biggest exports. Like I think
Jack Reynor is not doing too badly.
No, yeah,
himself. We saw him in Sing Street.
I always forget he was in that.
Yeah.
Love that movie.
It's the best part of Sing Street, not the music. but Jack Reynor, I thought he's a great actor, and his I don't know, is it hard to play a bastard? Because he did it really well, and the point I felt sorriest for him when he was just like seeing his girlfriend who he really wants to dump from like 2 years ago, and that's the main reason he's a bastard, is because he's stuck with this girl who they want to separate, and he never got the balls to say, I think we should just split up and do our own thing, and that's led him to be the knobhead that he is. But then this girlfriend who was brought to Sweden with her for reasons is like the May Parade, and he's suddenly like lost and alone of a sea of white dresses. Then he sits down and he's like tripping balls, and that guy just like smacks his hand and everything just goes poof. And it's like, why did you do that? and my head just went poof at that point. It was like really kind of like viscerally weird, kind of intense like sequence of events, that bit. And that's actually the bit that's kind of stuck with me more so than like burning people alive in the yellow triangle house. But I think there's lots of these scenes that I think people have taken away from the film that is the bit that sticks to them, I guess. Is that right? What are your favourite scenes that stick with you guys?
Yeah, I mean, so we've always talked about how, so we saw this in the cinema together, and we basically just sat in the car afterwards in silence for about 5 minutes, just of like, I don't know. And it literally, like, we kept over the next like 2 weeks, we just kept messaging. It's like, I'm still thinking about Midsommar. It's like, yeah, I can't. It's something about it has stuck with us, but couldn't exactly figure out what. But our first Midsommar special, we actually did. It was our top 3 scenes from Midsommar that stuck with us.
What were your top 3 scenes? Give us one of them scenes. So obviously people go to your website, the podcast nobody asked for.
I mean, for me, like, it sounds weird, but even just the opening mural, really ends up sticking with you because it's so not how you start a film, right? Like
giving everything away.
Yeah, it's such like a weird, when you're going to watch what you're thinking is going to be like a Wicker Man-esque cult movie, you sit down, this really loud, like jarring folk-ish music starts playing, and then they just show this really like horrifically surreal like mural, and it's like, okay, what? it does like really stick with you kind of for a long time after that. And then obviously the hammer smash face, like it's there for a while, right?
Hammer Smash Face is such a good metal band name, isn't it?
It's Hammer Smash Face is a metal song, but we'll talk about Cannibal Corpse another day.
Helen, do you have any scenes that stick with you?
I mean, like all of them. There's like
that's cheating.
So much going on. I've already mentioned I really do love the bit with the like blinking flower when she's tripping. I think that's great. But the May dance, I think, is amazing. I just love the way that it's filmed and kind of the energy, and they're all dancing and it's just kind of mad. So I do like that one. But yeah, and then, you know, Pew Pie. I mean, who doesn't want to meet pie? Yeah.
What I was going to ask for the May dance. Do you think it was a setup that she won that, or was it? Yeah.
I can't see past
the true
that.
May Queen though. So
I think they decided that the minute she rocked up, right?
Yeah. What about you, Graham? What stuck with you?
I've already spoken about it, and I will always go back to it as the Florence Pugh realizing what's happened to her sister and her family. It's guttural, that reaction, and I mean, it's one of those times where it's really frustrating that horror doesn't get the recognition it deserves, because I really think Florence Pugh deserves some kind of awards recognition for this performance, because I just think she played it brilliantly.
In that phone call scene, you can see Christian's face like, oh fuck, I'm gonna have to stick with it for a long time now.
But that whole thing, like it's the way it's filmed, is because it's one of the only scenes in the entire thing that takes place in the dark.
In the dark, yeah.
And it's about 2 minutes long. And you know what's going to happen. Like, you might not know how, but you know what it's leading up to. And the way that they drag it out for the whole, as long as they do, again, it just kind of makes it hit even.
I mean, the reveal of the yeah, that was super dark.
Yeah.
When it goes back to what you were saying as well earlier, like Ari Aster shows the whole face with the gaffer tape and the hose. You'll see the hose going into someone's room in other movies, and that's probably where it will cut away. But yeah, Ari goes for it, doesn't he?
Guys, is there anything else you want to say before we head to the scores?
On a massive tangent, everyone should watch The Strange Thing About the Johnsons, which is a short film that Ari Aster made before Midsommar, and it is
wild,
mind-blowingly wild. It's available. The only place really to watch it is on YouTube, but strongly recommend it.
You recommended other films before you get to recommend Midsommar here. I mean, be it as it may, let's head to the scores.
Hello, I'm Hannah Flint from the First Film Club, a film podcast series dedicated to established and emerging talent, both in front of and behind the camera, and the feature debuts that launched their careers. From the new drama Mass to the cult classic Heathers, each episode is dedicated to a film, a guest, and the behind-the-scenes stories, memories, and advice from their time on set. Find us, the First Film Club, wherever you listen to your Stripped Media podcasts. Come join the club.
Welcome to our Flixwatcher scores. They're always out of 5. You may have decimal places if you wish, and we will start with you, please, Ian, with your recommendability.
Okay, so recommendability. So I did some maths before joining this, and we have recommended on the podcast Midsommar 146 times. 146 times, and the director's cut. And one of those recommendations was to the director of photography for the film. A little bit of cheating, because one of those recommendations was a very bad Midsommar of 69 pun, which we counted as recommending Midsommar 69 times. So I have to give it a 5. We've based an entire podcast around how much we, in part at least, around how much we love this film. So it has to be a 5.
Graham?
There's not much more to add there. Yeah, it's a 5. I would be lying if I said anything else.
Helen?
To be honest, I would have been disappointed had you not given it anything than a 5. I mean, horror isn't for everyone. There is that to say. But I think this is a lot more accessible than Hereditary. And I think even if you maybe aren't a horror fan, you should be a Florence Pugh fan. So I think on the basis of kind of like her, and it's such an incredible performance. And it's not sort of horror. There's a few really specifically horrific moments, but the rest of it is so colourful and light and a little bit weird. You know, you can kind of look away for those moments if you don't like them. And there's just so much going on, and it's just a really kind of like weird and interesting film. So I'm also going to give it a 5.
Wow. Sorry to let you down. I mean, I don't succumb to peer pressure. I'm going to go for 4.5. It's either it's my horror kind of bias that I didn't watch it, and also when someone does a good film the first time, you're like, no, it's not going to happen again. But yeah, still, yeah, I wouldn't give it straight up 5 because there's some dark themes there. So I couldn't just randomly recommend it to everyone. But 4.5, I think that's decent for a horror film from myself. So there you go, 4.5. Repeat viewing score, Ian.
So again, as talking, this particular bit is a selfish one, right? I understand why other people might not want to massively rewatch a 2+ hour horror movie, but I personally adore this film. Like you said, it is the use of color. It's not quite like anything I've seen before. It is the messages of kind of grief and the depictions of that is something that kind of speaks to me with some things as well. And yeah, I've watched this film. I mean, we watch it yearly since it's come out minimum. So yeah, it is a 5.
Yeah, I was trying to work out how many times I have seen it. I've watched the director's cut twice. I've seen the cinematic cut twice in the cinema with Ian. Both times we went and watched it at the Prince Charles on Midsummer's Day, because obviously that's the kind of thing that we do. And then I've seen the cinematic cut probably another 4 times at home. So what we're talking about 8 times in total.
Before coming on here,
I didn't, because I had to get another film in. So I thought I know this film well enough. So I haven't given it that 9th watch just yet. But it's in the offing. And yeah, obviously with that many watches, I can't give it anything less than a 5.
Yeah, that's insane. Was it 3 years since it's come out? There's other films, guys. There's other films, shorter ones too. In that 8 times you've seen Midsommar, you could have seen other films like double the amount of films. Helen?
I have not seen it as much as you guys. So this is my 2nd watch, and only because I've been saving it for someone to pick it to watch it again on Netflix, to have the experience to talk about it. So obviously thrilled that you watched it. I am going to watch it again. I don't quite know when. I'm kind of feeling like I might like to see it again on the big screen, and at least maybe check out the director's cut for that. So I'm going to give it a 4. I mean, there's loads of stuff you can get on the second time, I think.
I'm going to watch it again at some point, and I think I'd like to watch the director's cut, and then that might be it. So I'll leave you guys to ratchet up the double digits. So yeah, 2.5, because I'll definitely watch it again, but I just don't know how often after that. Small screen score, Ian.
Yeah, so for me, it is very much, I think, a big screen film, right? I think, again, with kind of the wide open spaces and things like that, it does lend itself to the cinematic experience. And And there's also, I'm trying to phrase this in a way that doesn't make me sound like a massive wanker, but there's always there's a weird feeling in the room when you're watching it in a cinema, right? Like something is, for want of a better phrase, in the air. I don't think the small screen, it's not that it detracts from the film, but the big screen elevates the film. So for this, I've just gone 4.5, just because, just 4.5. But just because I think it is, if I could pick, I would go big screen, but I wouldn't necessarily turn my nose up at it on a small screen either.
So for me, I've had to go a bit lower here, because I think one of the things with Midsommar, and as we mentioned when we saw it at the cinema, the cinema experience for me, like, you've got watching the film, and then there's the few, like, half hour afterwards in the car journey home where you're dissecting the film and kind of, if it's a great film, you're kind of going over all the great parts and talking about the actors and the themes and the things that maybe you saw and whoever you watched it with didn't. And that was such a big part of at least the first viewing of this, that I think that is so important. Then couple that with the fact that it is such a stunning movie, the audio editing and the soundscaping in a cinema is fantastic. And the other time I've seen it that wasn't the first time was at the Prince Charles Cinema, which is one of my favourite cinemas it is my favourite cinema in the entire world. So with all of that in mind, and look, don't get me wrong, I've watched it 6 times on the small screen as well. It does lend itself to the big screen better. So I'm going to give it like a 2 here for the small screen. Like, I will absolutely watch it on the small screen, but it's so much better on the big screen.
Helen.
Yeah, so I saw this at the cinema. I saw it at the cinema with a past guest and Chevis Rawlin, quiz team member John Lunny, who we really seem to go to the cinema and watch like really weird films. And I think at several points we sort of looked at each other and was like, what is this? So yeah, I would really, really recommend, if you can, going to the cinema and watching it, and maybe taking someone who's not seen it before with you, and to have that moment where you just watch their face as they just try and work out what's going on, and have that beautiful moment afterwards where you do just look at the person you're with and go, what was that? So it is a very, very beautiful experience. But if you can only see it on Netflix, then, it's still okay, I think. So yeah, I'm going to give it 3.5 for small screen.
I'm going lower than you guys, going 2.5. I'd really like to, if I do see the director's cuts, ideally be in the cinema, ideally on the, would it be Prince Charles or Prince Charles Central Screen 1 kind of thing? And I think the bit that's missing isn't necessarily the visuals, because the visuals are stunning here, and I think they look better projected on a big screen. But you're talking about that unified experience, about sharing that in the cinema at the same time, and that when the film gets that, whether it's a comedy or horror or just something weird going on, like I remember seeing The Truman Show and being like completely discombobulated in the cinema with other people. That's such an amazing experience, and that's what I missed from lockdown and not going to the cinema. And I think this film would have that in abundance. So it's the shared experience that takes it down a few more notches. Engagement score, Ian.
So for engagement score, I'd love to give it a 5, but it is I go 4.5 just because it's a length thing, right? Like if someone had put it on, depending where it is in the film, it is a long thing. It's a film I think you need to kind of prepare yourself for a little bit. But, once you're locked in, right? It's, it would be very, very difficult for me to turn the film off once it was on. But just because it's 2 hours, 20 minutes long, I can't quite give it the 5.
Graham, engagement score.
So, yeah, I guess I think I fall very squarely in line with what Ian said there, really. I've watched it so many times and I've never turned it off. So it's definitely up there. But I can appreciate that a slow burning 2.5 hour plus horror movie isn't necessarily for everyone. So yeah, I think it will knock the 0.5 off just to be aware that some people may struggle, but for me, absolutely engaged throughout. So 4.5.
Helen.
Yeah, I mean, it is not long. There's no getting around the fact that we're talking 2 hours 27 minutes. I thought I would be kind of like more maybe on my phone and like doing a little bit of research when I was watching it, but I found that once it started, like I was so into it again that I surprised myself that I was more engaged than I was expecting to be. So yeah, I'm going to go 4.8.
Yeah, I'm going to go for a 4.2. Enjoyed it. I was engaged. I knew there was going to be an orgy scene coming up. I didn't know what was going to happen with the bear. And I didn't know whether it was going to be as simple as them being picked off one by one, which it was. So it kept me engaged all the way through. I think that's it, yeah. And that gives us an overall score of do some maths, 4.15625.
That's good.
Very good, very good. Me mainly bringing it down. Oh, actually, there's a small screen score. Yeah. Guys, should we head to the Twitter? So everyone do follow us online on Twitter in particular, because we put out a shout out before we record the film, asking you guys to give your opinions. Look out for a tweet like this. We're reviewing Midsommar with Lord Harries and with Graham from Nobody Asks For Pod. That's for the number 4. Have you seen it? Tells your thoughts and the score out of 5 stars for an on-air shout out on Flixwatcher. And we had a few responses here. I expected just 2. Ian, do you want to take us away with the first one?
So from Liam H. Dempsey, we have starts powerfully before devolving into a borderline parody of The Wicker Man. There's a fun comedy of man is somewhere in here, but Aster saddles the film with a crippling run time and tonal shifts so breakneck that it would require a far more intelligent script to pull them off. He's given it 2.5 stars. I think Aster makes amusing and visually arresting films that are grossly overlong cases of style over substance. Biggest case of Emperor's New Clothes in filmmaking for years, in my opinion.
Liam is not happy at all.
Neither are we.
Who is this guy?
Graham.
I'm going to go with the fantastically named Scheitgeist at Scheitgeist Pod, who is much more complimentary, takes big swings and toys with the audience, veering between horrific and comedic at times, but overall incredibly confident accomplishment from a singular director. And he gives it 4 bears out of 5, which I quite like.
Nice.
Yeah. Helen. Last one.
Well, this one's great. We got 2 reviews in one tweet on this one. So this one is from Lee Thomas. Superb, really got under my skin. One of the few examples where I thought the foreshadowing actually helped the film. Wife's review, really good. Annoyed me a bit why they didn't all just leave after it was obvious they were all weirdos. And he's given it 5 stars.
I think it was clear there was only one train every 45 minutes or something like that, and it takes like 20 years to get there, so they can't just disappear.
So we've actually we've stolen an idea for a future episode from that review. But at some point, we're going to do a top 3 list of horror movies where they could have just left, because I think that is such a great idea.
Well, there you go. Ian, Graham, can you tell us where we can find your podcast and say goodbye to listeners? And thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks. So you can find us on Instagram at the podcast Nobody Asked For. And so Instagram, you can find us on Twitter at Nobody Asked For Pod with the number 4, and everything is on our website, which is podcastnobodyaskedfor.co.uk. So all of our episodes, all of the links to other fancy places. Thanks for having us.
Anything from you, Graham?
You can find us. The podcast is wherever you listen to your podcast. We're on all of the platforms. Give us a listen, give us a review, come listen to more Midsommar content, because we've got plenty of it.
Thanks so much.
Do follow them. They've got hours and hours and hours and hours of it, and there will be more. Thank you very much, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
There will always be more.
Bye.
Bye.
Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty, mighty tunes, and Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Ben, and that's Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell him Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.